made an interesting discovery. Dr. Ian Stevenson, while studying such cases for over 2 decades, made an interesting discovery. He noticed that at least a third of the subjects he'd interviewed who had memories of a past life also had curious birthmarks or birth defects that do not have an explanation in this life. The location of those birthmarks corresponded with often fatal wounds on the bodies of the deceased persons they claimed to have been. In several cases, Dr. Stevenson was also able to present to the world photographic evidence of this remarkable correlation between birthmarks or birth defects and fatal wounds.
Ian was always very interested in psychosomatic medicine, the interaction between mind and body, so these cases really intrigued him quite a bit. And he spent years studying and collecting them. He eventually published a book, Reincarnation in Biology, which is 2,000 pages long and has over 200 of these cases. And most of them involve not just sort of the usual blemish like anyone have, but some very unusual and at times pronounced marks or defects.
We can understand how this might be possible by looking at the interaction between psychological and physical issues. To start with, studies have shown that mental factors can produce general changes in the body. For instance, stress can contribute to illness, and hopelessness has been shown to increase the risk of heart attack and cancer. What is far less accepted is the idea that individual mental images can produce very specific changes in the body. And this is what we need to consider in order to make sense of these birthmark cases.
So like there was a little girl who remembered the life of a man who was murdered and his fingers were chopped off at the end of his life, and that she was born with very mangled fingers. There was another little boy who remembered the life of a boy in another village who had lost the fingers of his right hand in a fodder chopping machine. And this boy was born, his left hand was perfectly normal, and his right hand just had stubs for fingers. So that's a very unusual defect and matched the other features of the case. So there are ones like that where the body presents physical evidence of this connection to a past life.
There are many examples of birthmarks and birth defects that are truly remarkable. One such case is that of Titu Singh from India. Titu Singh was 2.5 years old when he began to tell his family of his other life in the city of Agra. His memories were quite specific. He said his name was Suresh Verma. He was the owner of a radio, television and video shop. He had a wife named Uma and 2 children. He also said that he had been shot, cremated, and his ashes had been immersed in the river. Titu was born with birthmarks that exactly matched the bullet wounds on Suresh's head.
Titu, who had a birthmark here in his temple, and I looked to see if I could see any birthmark in the back of his head, didn't. And then we went to the hospital and got the autopsy for Suresh, and the bullet had entered here, just exactly the same spot in Suresh's temple, and exited behind his ear on the same side. And sure enough, his skull is distended there. And, I asked his mother, was that there from birth? And she said, oh yes, oh yes.
These cases are evidence supporting the reincarnation explanation and indicate that emotions, attachments, fears, addictions, likes and dislikes, and even identification with a particular country or gender may be able to carry over from one life to the next.